children, if I want to talk to your manager parents, what has been your most embarrassing experience? We traveled a lot when we were younger and would skip lines at the airport since we were kids. But now we were all in our early teens and my mom faked having a heart condition to skip the long line to get on the airplane. Flight attendant would have none of it and told us to go back to the end of the line. I still remember the smiles and looks of everyone there. I never understood this strange addiction to getting on the plane first. I like to spend as little time as possible in a cramped aluminum tube surrounded by loud strangers bumping into you trying to put their luggage in overhead bins. I wait at the ducking gate until the end. It's not like you're going to get a better seat and then the same people are the ones rushing to get off first. I don't get it. If you have carry-on luggage or if it's open seating, then it would be worth it to board first to find good spots. My mom has been this person regularly throughout my life, but I do have one positive story with it. She and I went to eat at Portillo's when I was a teenager and we sat in the back of the restaurant where it was more private so we can eat in peace. About 10 minutes into our meal, two people come into the empty area and sit down to tables away from us. Turns out it was a manager and an employee that was getting written up. The manager was being a towards the employee, criticizing and belittling them. My mom put down her food and walked over and started yelling at the manager for being such an asshole. She went on a rant about how rude and wrong it was of him to do this in front of the public 2 tables away from customers and really let him have it. She demanded the phone number of the manager above him and we left after she received it. I was pretty embarrassed at the time. But as I got older I realized that she was standing up for that employee and how wrong that manager really was. I'm not 100% sure what she did with that phone number because I lived with my dad and I had to go home after that meal. Props to her. Also yum, Portillo's. The number of cashiers my father demanded the manager fire because they were too slow, rang us up wrong, etc., including one they actually did. I'll never forget that girl taking her Home Depot apron off and walking away sobbing. To his credit, I guess, my dad seemed surprised that it actually worked, must have felt at least some level of guilt, and never did it again. I bet the reason he never did it again is because he suddenly empathized with the cashier. Up until that moment he saw himself as the little guy being pushed around by forces outside his control, so he's pushing back as a kind of valiant hopeless defense. But when he saw the cashier take off her apron and cry, he realized that she's being pushed around by forces outside her control too, and that he's the one doing the pushing. It was probably a profound life-changing realization for him. I found myself remembering the day in kindergarten when the teachers showed us Dumbo, and I realized for the first time that all the kids in the class, even the bullies, rooted for Dumbo against Dumbo's tormentors. Invariably they laughed and cheered, both when Dumbo succeeded and when bad things happened to his enemies. But I thought to myself, how did they not know? They didn't know. It was astounding, an astounding truth. Everyone thought they were Dumbo, Batman, the idiot. Right, so my mum and me went shopping, and she dropped a melon on the way out. She then claimed it was bruised and demanded a full refund. When she refused, she shouted at customer service and demanded the manager. I just sat there with a kill me now expression on my face. After, one of the customer service employees gave me a chocolate bar, so 7-year-old me was happy. I can't even imagine. My mom was the kind of mom that would look at our receipt, realize they didn't charge us for the buns, and go back to customer service to have them ring it up. My mother did this in restaurants non-stop growing up. She would demand to see the manager because my burger, which I asked for medium, had some pink in it. At a family friend's cookout, not a restaurant, I bit into a burger that had ice in it. I was about 12. I showed my dad, and he silently threw it in the trash. He told me to eat some chips and coleslaw instead, but don't make a big deal out of it. As an adult I enjoy rare steaks, but I can't bring myself to order a burger rare. Guess I made a big deal out of it anyway. Edit. It was not an ice cube. More like flakes of ice from the patty being frozen. My dad really doesn't like confrontation. I don't like confrontation either, but as an adult I'm assertive enough to tell a friend if they undercooked something. You shouldn't eat a burger rare unless you know that the meat grinder met the required standards. The difference has to do with surface area. With a steak, the entire surface area is exposed to high heat, so any bacteria is killed. The ground beef has surface area on each little piece of meat, and the meat in the center of a rare burger has not been exposed to enough heat to kill off the bacteria. There are places that won't let restaurants sell a burger less than medium well. I might be late, but my dad once asked the guy at the Verizon wireless store to give him his own social security number because he asked for my dad's. My dad walked out afterwards with some stranger's SS number on a post-it. I was a silent bystander because I really wanted my first phone. I hope the guy didn't actually give your dad his SSN lol. Haha right. My dad tossed it anyway. I'm betting he didn't make sure to use a secure trash can. I was with my parents on vacation and the hotel put charges on the bill by accident. My mom marched to the front desk and demanded to see the manager. There was a long line, but she cut right in front of it. The manager wasn't very helpful, probably because she was rude. So my mom went to all the other customers in line and told them that the hotel was a scam and they were ripping us off with fake charges. She made a scene. The hotel called the police and we were escorted off the premises by actual cops. I died inside. There really is an art to stuff like this, and your mom obviously doesn't have it. You can be mad, just don't be rude. I remember a time we were on a Vegas trip with extended family. Cousin was having a super trashy wedding there, and my aunt and uncle booked a room in the Luxor, non-smoking. They were given their room key. It was a smoking room. My aunt was pissed, but with all her fury she spun up some charm as well and they were upgraded to one of those rooms that were less rooms and more like 3-bedroom apartment. You gotta not be a dick when you're mad and people will give you everything to make their mistake go away. About once a month my dad gets drunk and calls various customer service centers demanding stuff. Once he finally gets off the phone, frequently 45 plus minutes later, he spends the next few days telling us all about how he slew the customer service dragon and boy people sure don't appreciate their customers nowadays blah blah blah. No, Dad, you're being an asshole. No one appreciates that. If you've worked for DirecTV customer service anytime since 1996, I apologize on behalf of my dad. Edit. Another story for y'all. I also remembered one time McDonald's was having some kind of 2-for-1 breakfast sandwich deal going on where the total was about $3. He gets his breakfast, drives 25 minutes to work, realizes he's missing one of the sandwiches, and proceeds to call McDonald's customer support every evening after work for a week to complain about his wasted $1.50. They gave him apologies. They gave him coupons. But he just wanted to yell. Does he call himself a dragon slayer? I'm so glad he doesn't. That was artistic license on my part, but it's very much the attitude he has. He creates an adversary and pats himself on the back for defeating it. Dead quixote. Before Value Village, Savers in the States I think, changed policies. She would cut tags to get discounts, since the cashiers would basically make up whatever price they thought it would be on the spot. If they highballed it, she would get a manager involved, and I hated that. Lots of secondhand / thrift shops now have a rule that items without tags will not be sold, likely for the above scenario. When I was a young child on a long distance flight, my mother let me and my brother sleep on the floor. For safety reasons, the flight attendants told my mother that we were not allowed to sleep on the floor. She started to argue with the flight attendants, who then turned to the pilots. The pilots threatened to turn the plane around unless we get up from the floor, but she continued to argue. The pilots announced they were about to turn around because of my mother, so all the passengers got pissed. Eventually she caved in when she had all passengers and flight crew on a Boeing 747 against her. I like that a parent got hit with the "I will turn this thing around" card. She got outmommed. My mother is a nightmare with customer service, even with the fact that her daughter works in customer service and deals with people like her on the daily. So many incidents stick out in my mind, but one that really embarrassed me was we were at Walmart. The stoker was struggling and dropped their price scanner thing on the ground. I was going to go help her gather her things she was struggling with when my mom came out like a bat out of hell and yelled, "You know you should pick that up, people could trip," and then she darted off with the cart. I was so embarrassed I just walked away in shame and when I pointed it out to my mom the girl dropped it on accident. She said, well, she should be more careful. K. My mom used to be much worse towards customer service people. I'm the eldest, so I was the first to get a job at the grocery store, and luckily when she saw me behind the counter, it made her realize to not be a jerk all the time. She has her moments, but it really helped overall. Sad this didn't happen to your mom. My mum demanded to see a cafe's hygiene certificate when she saw an employee go from cutting cake in the kitchen to handling money at the till, even though the real problem is going the other way. How do you know that cake wasn't actually hollow and filled with cocaine and tuberculosis? Huh. Then it's not actually hollow, now is it? My mom used to run restaurants. My stepfather used to be a chef in high-end restaurants and is the kind of guy who expects to be treated better than he is currently being treated, regardless of whatever that treatment is. They are not fun to go out to eat with. The most embarrassing experience is actually their most embarrassing experience, one where I embarrassed them. My wife and I pride ourselves on being a relief table when we go out to eat. Both of us have been servers, and there's always the counterpoint to the difficult table. That's us. Barring horrible service or bad food, we are super easy customers, tip well, and try to have a good time with our server. Furthermore, we just treat people nicely. So you can imagine our disdain when my parents act like they're ducking royalty at a dinner service. My wife and I went out to dinner with them. They were being particularly tough. My mom was acting like she was Gordon Ramsay analyzing the business, criticking everything down to the amount of bubbles in her seltzer. Looks like it's time to change the carbon dioxide. My stepdad was getting more and more heated over stupid things like the amount of ice in his drink and how the waitress didn't top off his water that he was barely sipping on fast enough. It came to a head when my stepfather ordered a steak medium well. It came back medium well, and for some reason he changed his mind that he wanted it medium rare while it was cooking, and they didn't read his mind, so he gave attitude, as did my mom. They jumped really quickly to demanding free stuff. I'm an adult and this may be the first time they realize this. I interrupted in front of the server and said something like, really? This is what you're doing? That's what you ordered? I turned to the server and said we do not need anything carved. I then pulled out my wallet and handed her my card and said this is for the bill. We'll happily wrap up with what we have here. I'm very sorry for their behavior. You're doing great. Then the line that stung them so deep they still bring it up years later. I was taught to treat people nicely, a lesson that seems to be forgotten. Thank you. They turned red. The server walked away. I looked down and cut my steak and didn't say a word. They were so flabbergasted that the meal was virtually silent, except me asking my stepfather how his steak was a few minutes later. I signed the check, gave a big tip, and we walked out and said goodbyes. They've been nicer to servers each time that we've gone out since. Quote, the meal was virtually silent, except me asking my stepfather how his steak was a few minutes later. So, do you wheel those things around in a wheelbarrow, or do you just have a ridiculous core?